there's two types of people. You either have a solution mindset or a problem mindset, and you can tell when it when the going gets tough, you tell who has that mindset instantly, because people are complaining. It's like the sky is falling, and then other people are like, no, this is great. We've got this. It's not going to be a problem. Take this pandemic as an example. I made a decision and got my team together in the pandemic. I said, look, guys, we're going to have a great pandemic. Everyone's freaking out. They're panicking. We're not going to spend our days, watching Netflix and, hiding in our house. Like, we're going to do some cool stuff. And so I had a great pandemic, and it was all about just mindset.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. Happy New Year, everybody. Very excited for today's episode in particular. Today's guest is a former Navy SEAL with combat deployments in Afghanistan, the Persian Gulf, and then after serving as a sniper teacher, right? And we'll get into that, into what it was like being a sniper in SEAL Team 3 for almost 10 years. He found a new purpose as an entrepreneur, impressively bootstrapping his business to 8 figures plus. More recently, he's a New York Times bestselling author who's written and collaborated on 14 books. I've got to figure out how you can write 14 books and run an 8-figure company, so we can catch up on that later. But I want you to please join me in welcoming combat decorated Navy SEAL sniper, CEO of Soft Rep Media, and whiskey lover, Brandon Webb. Brandon, thank you for joining the show.
Thanks, Jake. Great intro.
It's good. We do our homework here, man. So again, we talked about this a little bit, and for those of you who tune in every week, you know the drill here. But we like to start in the beginning, and I got to tell you, this is going to be a fun one. So Brandon, if we go back and we talk about kind of your early days, so obviously there's all the things that you've accomplished in your, call it adult life. You were born in Canada, from what I understand, right? Born in Canada, moved to the US at age 7 and lived in a boat. So I want to talk about, and then obviously you traveled. I mean, it's crazy, just, all the different things. So tell me, like, what was it like growing up in a boat? Were you always in Ventura? Were you traveling all over? And then I definitely want to make sure we talk about, the Tahiti at age 16 and what happened there. But what was, early Brandon, like growing up?
Well, my dad had met my mom in Malibu, California. He had moved from Toronto at a young age. Like, his father actually kicked him out of the house for not cutting his hair. This is like in the 60s, right? And
Hippie.
He found himself in Malibu, met my mom, moved her to Canada. They got married. So it was like she went from North Hollywood to like interior British Columbia, near Vancouver, but we were up in the middle of nowhere, mountain country, Canada. And I grew up in this small ski town called Kimberley, and by all means had a great life. I was kind of a hell child, which I talk about in my first book, The Red Circle. But my mom got me into sports, really skiing, and then I had this, really, I had fond memories of my childhood. But my dad had also built up a construction company. He ended up losing everything in the savings and loans crisis. He had a big project that went under, and eventually had to declare bankruptcy. So it really was tough on him. He took it very hard, but my mom and him always had this dream to sail around the world. So they said, you know what, to hell with it. We're going to buy a boat, move the family on the boat, and we're going to pursue this dream of like cruising and taking our kids,
Wow.
On adventures. So we bought a boat in Vancouver, about a 47-foot catch, sailed from Vancouver all the way down to Ventura, California, mainly because my dad found superintendent work in concrete tilt up construction. So he found really good work in California because LA was booming, and we lived on the boat in Ventura Harbor, and we would save up money, and then we took a big year trip to mostly Baja, Mexico. We sailed from Ventura down to Cabo San Lucas, and then went up Sea Cortez, and it was an amazing time. I think I was around 11 years old and just had a blast running around Cabo before there was any hotels. It was just a field with donkeys, and they had two bars, one of which the Van Halen guys called Squid Row.
Yeah.
It was a blast, and then came back, and we're kind of doing the repeat to save up money to go on a much bigger trip, and then I ended up. My mom got me my first real. My dad's like, you need to get a job. You see me, he's hanging around with my buddies at the harbor, and I think he was worried about me getting in trouble,
Sure.
And so I got this really crappy job as basically a nighttime janitor for a boat store. So I would mop and sweep the floors, take out the trash, and it's one of those jobs where you're just like, this freaking sucks.
Yeah.
Um,
Doesn't sound like the ones like, oh, it was
yeah,
easy. I just like sat behind a desk or
yeah, it was just like mopping these floors, going, I don't want to do this kind of work, but it builds character. And then my mom said one day she came home and she said, there's this scuba diving boat that they need a young kid to kind of help with odd jobs, take out the trash, help people off with the equipment. And this boat would leave for like a day or 2 or 3 day trips to the Channel Islands to take these sport divers diving. So the owner Bill and the captain Mike gave me a shot, and I worked a couple weekends, and they say, hey, you can work for us for tips, and the tips were really good. I was 12, about to turn 13, and then I mentioned this because this was what I think really kind of occasionally you get these jobs that are super influential and are this, you're at the Y in the road, right? And
yeah.
this kind of set me on the path to become a Navy SEAL, as well as showed me. I remember working this job, and as a 12-year-old kid, making $100 over a weekend is pretty good money.
Yeah.
And the one of the captains taught me how to scuba dive, so I got certified that summer. And I remember thinking to myself as a 13-year-old kid, um, I was like, wow, this work doesn't have to be terrible. Like this is like adventure I'm on, and having incredibly fun time doing this job, working my ass off, but it didn't seem like work. And I remember it made an impact on me as a 13-year-old. Um, so I worked that boat for a couple years, and then my dad, I remember he had come home one night, and my mom was actually always very entrepreneurial and adventurous. She got a job cooking on the offshore oil platforms. She would sometimes take a helicopter to the platforms in the middle of the channel where the Channel Islands are, and cook for this oil rig with her best friend, Betsy, who became a business partner of her later in life. Um, my mom's like flying out, swinging on a rope to get to the platform. It's just crazy stuff. And my dad came home one night and he said, "Look, I don't want to be the family that's always talking about this big sailing trip that we're never going to take. So we're going to sail to New Zealand. We've got the papers all set up for the visas." And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's great, but I don't want to go. I have this great job. At the time I was 15, the owner was actually paying me a salary and I was making tips. So I was making incredible money for somebody with no overhead, no
Right.
rent, no
And
bills
what about
to pay.
school? Is like school even happening at this? Like, is there
Yeah,
still school
school.
or yeah?
Yeah, school was on and off. Like we'd go on the Mexico trip, and I would do home study, which I prefer. I mean, I have my thoughts on education today. I think YouTube should be teacher of the year. Um, but
100%. I actually talk
yeah,
about this a lot, not to go on a tangent. My son's 7, right? So he's in first grade. And I'm dead serious. Well, one, he already knows how to work YouTube, so we don't need to worry about that. But and especially kids coming out of college, that's, instead of teaching them geometry, teach them how to Google and YouTube things, right? Like how to like
yeah. Teach them how to teach
use
themselves almost.
yeah. I mean, all the answers exist, right? Yeah. So anyway, I'm
Yeah,
with you
my
on that.
son, he's in college now, but he taught himself how to code and machine learning all online through YouTube videos. So
Yeah, exactly. All right,
um,
so there's a shout out for YouTube. So all right,
yeah,
so this trip you don't want to go on,
yeah,
making good
it was a
money.
trip I don't want to go on. And like every 15-year-old kid, I wanted to like get my driver's license and chase girls and my buddies, and I didn't want to go on this trip. It was just, as a teenager, I was kind of, and that's a difficult time in the teenager, especially boys. It's puberty and all the other stuff that goes along with
Yeah.
it. So, but off I went, and we did we went from Ventura, California, sailed down to Baja, over the mainland, all the way down to Acapulco. Acapulco, I turned 16 at the Acapulco Yacht Club. Then we went from Acapulco over to the Marquesas Islands, which is the first island chain in French Polynesia, and it was amazing, like beautiful islands. And the Polynesians are the ones that ended up sailing and settling in Hawaii, right? So it's like a lot of history, but my dad and I started to be at odds with each other because I had all this boating experience, and it was like having two captains on the ship, and
Yeah, that
I had a
doesn't
big
work.
chip on my shoulder, and we had a couple of big arguments. And then when we made it to Tahiti, and Papeete, the capital, he basically, we had a big blow up, and it almost got physical. And my mom was crying, my sister's crying, and then my dad's, he said, "Look, I think you're young. You've expressed, before, how you wanted to stay back." And he's like, "Why don't you see if the owner Bill will take you back and let you work on the boat, and you can kind of go on your own way." And so we decided I would leave home at 16 in Tahiti. And so I called, this is before cell phones, or when cell phones were in these big suitcases, right? I remember going, dialing up
Like
Bill
a
from
sat phone, like I can picture
yeah,
it now. There's like big, huge, like
yeah. We
you had
didn't
to
even have,
unzip it. Like
I talked about this to my dad this past Christmas. You're just giving him credit. There wasn't even GPS when we took
yeah,
this trip.
that's right.
So
Yeah, they didn't even have that
you
type of stuff for those
you
types of
were
like ocean voyages.
yeah, sat nav. You had land-based navigation called Loran C for the US, but when you're international, you had no it was like navigating like with the sextant and the stars, like the old sailors. Like it's no joke. And I give my parents a lot of credit for taking a family on a trip like that, where you're just like off in the middle of the ocean. Um, but anyway, I made a landline call. Bill, the owner of the boat that I grew up working on, said, "Look, come back. You finished your junior year. Just work on the boat, and then if you want, I'll make you a captain. We'll get you tested with the Coast Guard and all this stuff." And so off I went. I grabbed a backpack, packed some stuff, a couple $100, and I was, from 16. I was been on my own ever since. Um, I decided being a boat captain wasn't the life I wanted. I wanted something more. And I think, as I grew up, became, 17, 18 years old, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do something, and kind of make my own way. And I found the SEAL teams. I ended up reading Marcinko's, the founder of SEAL Team 6, Dick Marcinko's book, Rogue Warrior, which is an amazing read. And that inspired me to kind of explore the SEALs. And to be honest, I didn't have great grades. I had this weird academic record. My Since I was a kid, I wanted to be a pilot. And then Top Gun came out. I was like, I want to fly
There you
jets.
go.
But I knew that I couldn't get into the academies. My grades were shit. And so I was like, well, I could join the Navy and be a Navy SEAL, and they'll pay for my college. So that ended
That's
up
how it started.
the path that I ended up taking. And it took me a while because back when I joined the Navy in '93, you could not get a direct contract for the SEALs. You had to take a regular job. If you wanted to go fast and get to this to SEAL training quickly, you took a very crappy job like a cook or a boatswain's mate, where it was like a 3-week school and then off you go to buds. But if you didn't make it, you're going to end up cooking on a ship somewhere in the middle
Right.
of nowhere. So I ended up I qualified for a search and rescue swimmer aircrew job. So basically flying in helicopters, being a search and rescue swimmer and operating the sonar equipment in the back of the
Whoa.
helicopter. And that was a great job. But in hindsight, it kind of locked me into a longer period before I could try out for SEALs. And
Any crazy stories
um,
about that, man? I mean, that to me sounds like one of the most crazy job. Like I picture like I mean, on your partner's probably the Coast Guard, right? Where they're like, you see these
yeah,
videos where they're just like these crazy, like any wild stories or any like one memory that stands out.
yeah, no, look, in the total props to the Coast Guard. They have one of the best search and rescue programs in the world. Those guys do rescues because they're involved in the primarily like civilian rescue, right?
Civilian,
And
yeah.
and we know in America any idiot can buy a boat and sail it off. And
Right.
no offense to my own parents, but you know the people get themselves into trouble a lot off the coastal waters of America. So those guys get a ton of rescues in dangerous conditions. Primarily the Navy search and rescue in helicopters. So they operate off of the Navy ships. I was on an aircraft carrier, so anytime that there are flight ops going on, the helicopters are first to launch, last to land, because they are primarily circling off the right side of the ship, or the starboard side, what we call it in the Navy. In case a pilot ejects, then we're there to go get them. But the Navy has such a great safety record. It's extremely rare that
Right.
those accidents happen. It does happen. Um, the to make a long answer longer, the most craziest experience I had was getting my crew chief qualification one night. I was doing my test flight. We had done some night vision. We were flying in the Persian Gulf on the Abraham Lincoln. We had been on night vision. We'd come off night vision, and so it takes your eyes about 20-30 minutes to adapt to the darkness. Again, once you've been on night vision, it's like going from day to nighttime.
Right.
We're in the Persian Gulf. There's no moon. It's cloudy, so it's very dark. And you have an overcast, so no starlight, no moon. And we're having to land on this destroyer to get gas to make it back to the mothership. And the crew in the back, I was with Rich Freeze, the senior crewman, and Freeze basically the pilot said, okay, we're slowing down to 90 knots so we can slide the cabin door open on the right side of the helicopter, because we would take this gunner's belt, strap it around your chest, and we would help spot the pilots as they kind of come in for this approach. Because the destroyers are this tiny little, it's like landing on a rooftop in New York City. It's a very tiny pad. Only, the helicopter pad is rocking back and forth. And so I remember opening the door, and normally I stick my head out and you can see the lineup lights, the approach lights, which the lights turn different colors to let you know you're on the correct glide slope.
Right.
And I remember I couldn't see any lights and I was confused. And then I looked up on the horizon, and then I saw the lights of the ship, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. And right then we hit the water,
Oh shit.
and we hit slow. Thank God, we all would have been dead. The What happened was the pilot Bennett got vertigo. He didn't tell anybody, and which was his first mistake. And this guy was not. I still to this day would say everything to his face. Like he just wasn't a. He was the kind of leader and officer and pilot that nobody wanted to fly with. He was a total jerk. They think he knew it all, right? And
Right.
this guy, his co-pilot, however, was this nerdy guy Kennedy, who everybody loved, because Kennedy was just, he was just a down to earth guy. He was goofy. and smart, but didn't talk down to the crewman in the back. Um, so water started coming in the cabin. I'm thinking to myself, I got this bottle that's called a Heeds bottle. It's like a little mini scuba tank. And I'm thinking, okay, we're going to crash. The first thing that happens in a helicopter, since it's top heavy with the rotor, it flips upside down in the water. And we have this dunker thing that we go through this training. And I think, hang on for the ride. And I'm going to put this bottle in my mouth and hopefully swim out of here. And water started coming in. I started screaming for altitude. Rich started screaming for altitude. Kennedy, the goofy co-pilot, was the hero of the whole thing. Bennett was like talking to himself, mumbling. Kennedy took the controls, pulled the collective, yanked us out of the water, put us in like an auto hover mode, which is like an autopilot. And we kind of said, oh shit, everyone was shaken up, right? We just went from like certain death to hovering. And now the destroyer is saying, what the hell is happening to you guys? You went off the radar, now you're back. It took us 4 attempts to land on that ship because we needed gas. And we got on the ship. Kennedy, Rich was the senior crewman in the back, really did a great job kind of boosting the confidence of Kennedy and just kind of being the, guy in the back, backing him up on the stats. And so we got gas, we landed on the carrier, and we had to file a report, an accident report, mishap report. And I remember the maintenance officer, nobody believed us. They said, there's no way you guys landed in the water. But they put the helicopter in the hangar bay and they took off the back sections of the tail, and like 5 gallons of seawater poured out. And the maintenance officer, I remember he looked at me and he said, holy shit. He's like, you guys weren't kidding. So both pilots, Kennedy, instead of being like, I guess he had some fault at play for not, he's up front as a co-pilot, but they both got their helicopter commander papers pulled. They largely got a slap on the wrist. I don't know where either of the two ended up at, but it was a big deal. The thing is, there was a lot of politics involved because the CO of the squadron didn't want it to be a big deal because
you want some perfect record and
so it's always politics involved but anyway, that was the most hairiest moment.
Wild, dude.
Flying there, and
wild,
it was man. It was pretty crazy.
And then how did you make the move, or like what was it really about wanting to get into the sniper group? What was it for you that you're like, hey, like this is a path, or what I want to
that wasn't even a choice of mine. So fast forward, I got my first package got declined for SEAL training. My second package got accepted, and I went to SEAL training in 1997 with class 215. 220 plus started. We finished 23 graduated. I ended up going to SEAL Team 3 and getting in my first SEAL platoon. And I was a new guy. And as a new guy, you're kind of like in the fire department on probation. You're kind of earning your keep. You just kind of keep your mouth shut, do your job. And I wasn't a very good shot. I never grew up firing guns. And I was kind of a bad, compared to the rest of the class, a bad shot. Then I got really good. And my platoon chief, Dan, pulled me and Glenn, my one of my close buddies, and we were both new guys together. He pulled us in the office and he said, hey, you guys are the best shots in the SEAL platoon. I'm going to offer you a chance to go to sniper school. And at the time, they didn't offer new guys sniper school. It was only offered to senior guys that had kind of proven themselves. And it was a tough school. It had a high failure rate. So we were thrilled and scared as well, because we're like, we don't want to be the guys that fail out, right? And I remember he said, don't effing fail, we're like, oh, great. Words of encouragement, right? Yeah, whatever you guys do, don't F it up, right? So off Glenn and I go at the end of our training cycle. And when you're at a SEAL team, you get into a platoon, you have about a 12 to 18 month training cycle. Then you take a operational readiness test, and then you're able to deploy overseas. So this was right at the end of that training period. We went, and I got the qual. We both did well, and that kind of put me into this world of snipers. Um, and then I did my second platoon, deployed to Afghanistan, came back, was one of the few snipers that had operational experience, and got pulled into advanced sniper training. And then the SEAL sniper course had, which is 3 months long, was going through an overhaul process. And um, one of the senior chiefs, Bob, said, "Hey, can you come down and help us with the first pilot program and give your input? Because you got you. This is he asked the sniper cell, which is the advanced training um, um, arm of the SEALs at the time. So we came down and he was impressed. He said, "Hey, do you want to be on as full-time cadre?" And I said, "Well, I'm about to take a break and I want to be a buds instructor, finish my degree and kind of take a break." And he's like, "Hey, we're at war and the course needs you. Get down here." So I kind of was like, okay, he made a good point. So I gave up like a really cushy job being a buds instructor and went to work at the sniper course. And then eventually Bob retired, and then I got put in charge as the course manager. I was 28 years old running the sniper program, and it was a great experience. But I had hit burnout, and that's why I ended up getting out of the Navy. But it was an amazing experience. I write about it extensively in all my books,
Yeah.
including Mastering Fear, because it really taught me. We were able to work with some of the best performance coaches in the world as we were modernizing the sniper program, not just with technology, but also like asking ourselves the question: how do we be better teachers? And we really adopted this mental management and positive psychology to the program, and it made a huge difference. We took a 30% failure rate and took it to almost zero. We started graduating everybody because we really just became better teachers. And that's something that's translated into my my post military career as an entrepreneur. Just the mindset. It's one thing to hold it yourself and know that I've been through all this crazy, SEAL training and adversity, and I have the tools. But it's another thing to kind of empower your team and your employees to have that same mindset, and use it to hire and screen people out, because it comes down to, I've seen there's two types of people. You either have a solution mindset or a problem mindset, and you can tell when it when the going gets tough, you tell who has that mindset instantly, because people are complaining. It's like the sky is falling, and then other people are like, "No, this is great. We've got this. It's not going to be a problem." Um, so take the, this pandemic as an example. I made a decision and got my team together in the pandemic. I said, "Look, guys, we're going to have a great pandemic. Everyone's freaking out. They're panicking. We're not going to spend our days, watching Netflix and, you know, hiding in our house. Like, we're going to do some cool stuff." And so I had a great pandemic, and it was all about just mindset.
All right, I want to get into that, but I have one question first. Is what do you think? People have seen the movies, right, or maybe seen Bradley Cooper or some of the other, right? What do you think's the one thing about being a sniper that most people have no idea of? Like most civilians would be like, "Oh, holy shit," because I think a lot of people, again, it's just like a very specific view. So I'd just be curious, from someone who's trained some of America's most legendary snipers and been one himself, what don't people know?
Um, so a couple things. Um, I think, and I'll keep it specific to the SEAL program. The SEALs, what we ended up learning was that when we looked at, okay, what are the case studies of the actual sniper missions happening in the SEAL teams? Because we're such a small community, most of the snipers were being deployed individually, so you can't afford this traditional shooter spotter pair, where you have two guys working together. And what we found out further was that the way we were testing people in the training program, the pairs would share a grade. So you would have a guy that would be a really good shot, but didn't understand ballistics, but he had a good spotter, so they would both pass. But when they got to the when they graduated and started working for real, they had some weaknesses because they didn't really understand ballistics and how to self spot. So we identified that and started training the we started at the end of the program, gave the individual test to make sure that the graduate, who was a SEAL sniper, had a very complex and grounded understanding of ballistics and could spot for themselves. And it's as simple as, if you're making say a 300-meter shot and the first shot doesn't hit, you got to decide what to do, right? And so you have to understand, okay, if I took the shot and I missed and I didn't see impact while I'm high, so how much do I need to correct immediately to make sure I get, either it's a correction on the elevation knob, or you hold on the scope, you bring the sights down and hold. But you have to understand, okay, what's my range, what's my hold, or what's my dial down to make sure I get an impact, and then I'm able to make it. And I'd rather guess low so I get impact, then I can measure it and be the third shot's a kill shot. And so you have to train these guys. And so I think what people don't understand about the modern SEAL sniper is that they are extremely deadly and effective on the battlefield. And I remember getting calls from Army units that were getting SEAL snipers loaned to them in Iraq, and these commanders were like, "What the hell are you teaching these guys? They're just like killing machines." So it was a compliment. But that, I think, patience, intelligence, all that other stuff, but specifically to the SEALs, like these are guys that can operate in any environment and be a lone sniper, and they have a very good understanding of the whole range of ballistics, long and short, and how to make these complex adjustments very quickly. So
That's
that's
wild, man.
something not too many people know about.
That's wild, dude. Yeah, and then I think you were starting to get into it too about, so you mentioned you made the transition, so you're like, all right, I got to do something different. You choose kind of an entrepreneurship path. Start, soft rep, a few years after. And so what was it that made you want to get into that? So you kind of start to get into kind of sharing your story. You publish Red Circle, same time soft rep comes out. We'll put links to
Yeah,
some of the older books, and we'll put links to the new stuff because I want to talk a little bit
thank you.
about that. And it sounds like a pretty cool new endeavor. I'm excited to read the new book. So talk to me about, again, like why entrepreneurship, and then why soft rep?
So entrepreneurship, I ended up realizing as I was going to night school, and I got interested in business. My parents are very entrepreneurial. Both became successful later on in life after having a bunch of you know success, some failures, um, and such, which is all learning experience. But I grew up in a very entrepreneurial environment. Even both sets of grandparents are entrepreneurs. My grandma on my mom's side had owned a bunch of collection agencies in Los Angeles in the 70s as a woman. Um, my grandparents in Canada. My grandfather worked for General Electric, or not General Electric, Canada Electric, and then was a blue collar to white collar guy. And then afterwards, did a big development, a mobile home park, and on a lake, and then started was an active hard money lender. So in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I grew up in this very entrepreneurial environment. So I decided I want to be my own boss. I My first startup out of the Navy was a training facility. I had raised 3.8 million with a couple partners, and we're going to do this big training facility out in the desert east of San Diego because the police, fire, emergency services, and the military needed more space to train. Um, I saw this running the sniper course because we ended up consolidating on the East Coast at this remote location in the Midwest because we had no place to train and train snipers in California. So I saw this. I'm like, wow, we need a place. Long story short, we got the approvals. It was extremely tumultuous environment. It was, political. environmental activism. We got the project approved. And then this was in 2008, housing market collapse, economy drops out, and we lost everything. Like, I lost my life savings. The project got killed. I mean, it's a lot more to it, but short version is I had to
Yeah.
walk away, and it was tough from as somebody that had, that was my first big failure professionally, and it was a tough pill to swallow. But I realized, falling back on my kind of mental management training in the sniper program as a teacher, I said, you know what, I just have to look at this as a learning experience and carry it on. So I ended up taking a defense job with L3, as a sales executive. And then I got into writing. I started writing just as a creative outlet for magazines, and I started blogging. Then I got asked to run a blog for military.com and had big success. And I was making, top income, working for L3, and having more fun doing this blog on the side that were paying me $1,500 a month for. And I was making, like, well into six figures at L3, but having more fun doing this, like, blog. And then it gave me the idea. I was like, because I grew the blog to their top traffic blog in 6 months, and they tried to hire me, and then the editor, Ward Carroll, at the time, for military.com, he realized I made more than he did at L3. And I was like, this isn't going to work. So I decided to start SoftRep, mostly as a military culture
Yeah.
blog, because I knew there was guys like yourself and the other people out there that were really interested in hearing about these stories and different characters. And what happened was, as the writing team grew, the what they realized, that the news outlets, because journalism has changed dramatically
Oh man.
in the past couple decades, right? It's become very much like news entertainment. Reporters don't go to faraway places and dig up stories. They write articles from the comfort of their apartment in Brooklyn, New York, right? And these young journalists have maybe one passport stamp in their passport book, right? And it's probably Cancun or something like that. And they're
Cabo,
writing
Squid
about,
Row. It's probably
yeah,
Cabo
yeah,
that's Squid Row, actually.
and they're writing about Syria and Afghanistan. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So, and this is across all spectrums of
Yeah.
right and left, liberal and conservative news outlets. My writers started going, this isn't what I read in the New York Times is wrong. So they would write a correct piece and source it, because they have friends overseas. And we started breaking news. And then these news outlets, NBC, New York Times, Fox, would call us and go, who the hell are you guys? So the site turned into a news site organically. And then I had this dilemma of, okay, I'm running this entertainment site that's now become a news site. And how the hell do I manage that? I'm not trained as a journalist. And
Right.
so we decided early on that we would try and be as apolitical as possible, with the bias towards the truth. And we just kind of had to put our own set of ethics in place. And we made a bunch of mistakes along the way, but that's SoftRep. And today we're we doubled in size from last year. We should double again this year. Uh, and look, on the way, as in 2000, I started the company in 2012. We added an e-commerce component in 2015 that blew up, but it created so many problems, because we did a subscription box called the Crate Club, and it was just an entirely different type of business. It was
Yeah.
managing product, inventory, supply chain, forecasting, and I made a ton of bad hires, just mistakes. And then COVID hit, and that business, the supply chain blew up, and I ended up selling to a competitor. Um, I went back to school. Actually, I went to Harvard Business School, this program for entrepreneurs called OPM. It's a 2-year program, because I was like, I thought I knew what the hell I was doing. I need to go back to school and learn, really have an understanding of and some fundamentals of business. And then I'm like, oh God, just sitting through these classes on how to hire properly, how to
You're just
build
like,
culture.
hey, as
I
a
was like,
CEO,
oh,
look,
did
I can
I?
totally, we've got 40
Yeah,
plus people. I can totally relate, man. It's like,
yeah. So I was just like shaking my head, like, what the hell was I doing? But now, you and I had the conversation at the beginning of the show before we started recording about what I'm excited about, what I'm focused
Yeah.
on. I'm kind of refocused and re-excited about soft rep because it's something that's very special and unique. And I think people are generally tired of the divisiveness in the country, and they want a place where they can go to get, they know at least that they're getting an honest look at things. And soft rep is that. Like, we do a really good job on foreign policy, defense news, um, kind of shining the light on issues that I think people are ready to talk about, with veteran suicide. The VA is,
Yeah.
there's a tremendous amount of incredible people that care at the Veterans Administration. The problem is it's a massive bureaucracy, and if a veteran enters that healthcare system, their chances of suicide go up 30 percentage points.
Wow.
That's a big fucking problem that needs to be addressed. And it's because the VA, I think, I almost think it's too broken to fix. I think they just need to get rid of it and give veterans access to private healthcare. But these are the kind of stories that we do, and war crimes, and these stuff that needs to be talked about, and holding the government accountable for 20 years of failed foreign policy. Right? You look at the underscore of that is the Afghanistan pullout, a complete disaster. We've armed the very group that we went into take out of power in 2001. Right now, they're heavily armed, backed by the Chinese. India has a huge problem with domestic terrorism. That's going to increase because China is at odds with India. Now they have this, border to kind of push terrorism into India through Afghanistan. So it's like a big problem. But
Yeah,
without going on a
that you wrote
tangent,
about. I mean, you wrote about some of this. Again, I haven't read,
yeah,
like, I know the title in like 2014, right? In
yeah, yeah,
one of your
and this,
books.
so that's kind of our sweet spot with soft rep news, and as well as still covering the cool, fun culture stuff on our podcast and the interviews that we do. We really try and give it give the American reader a straight talk with regards to what's happening with our own readiness of our defense and domestic security at home, but also what's happening in the world. Um, and yeah, it's nice to know that you can make a difference that way. And then we at the end of last year, we said, okay, what else can we do? Because government isn't going to solve our problems. I think that's clear to everybody by now. Like, what's our cause that we can get behind? And it's veteran mental health. So that's kind of something we're focused on as a business. Along with growing the subscribership, but that's a cause that we've kind of decided we're gonna take up and focus on. So yeah, I'm excited about
We'll link
soft
to
rep.
all this for people who want to get more information, right? And who want to,
Right.
learn more, help participate, etc. So we'll link to all this as a
Thanks.
part of this. So, again, as we start to kind of, wrap up here, let's talk about this next chapter for you, right? So again, you're
Yeah.
running a company that's, like you said, doubled year over year, going to double again. And now you're like, you know what? Not enough. I don't have enough to do, apparently. Like, I'm going to start writing fiction, right? And working with, if people who don't know John David Mann, he wrote Go Giver, pretty successful series of books. And what else do you like? So what made you get into that? And like, what are you excited for about that, about this next chapter?
Yeah. So I love creating things, whether it's product, stories. So I consider myself a creator. The reason I pivoted to fiction is because I wanted to create more, and kind of push. You can push a lot of stuff and talk about a lot of stuff in fiction that I couldn't. Like, look, I worked for a certain agency for a couple years after I left the military. Signed an NDA. Can't talk much about it, but I can sure as hell write about it in fiction. So um, that it just gives me that creative outlet.
Yeah.
And so I went to John. John and I have written a ton of books together, all nonfiction. and I had written a big chunk of our first book together, Steel Fear. I watched some videos. I read Stephen King's or his book On Writing, which is an amazing book for anybody that wants to write, whether it's a blog or um, or a novel. And just said, okay, I started writing this book, which actually is based on a true story. We talked about that helicopter crash, that same deployment, we had a sexual predator on the Abraham Lincoln, this floating city of 6,000 people. This guy had assaulted 6, 7 women, and he never caught him. And years later, I was just holding this thought going, imagine if it was a serial killer. Because everyone asks, like, how could this happen on a Navy ship? I'm like, the ship is not equipped to deal with complex crime. It would be like locking the doors to a football stadium and there's a killer on the loose. Are the security guards running
Right.
around the yellow jackets and radios equipped to deal with this kind of crime? Not at all. So it's similar on a Navy ship. And so that gave the seed for Steel Fear, which is about a serial killer on the loose at sea. And, so it's kind of like military slash, thriller genre.
Thriller, yeah.
And so I had written a big chunk of it and gave it to John. He's like, this is amazing. I kept pushing because I'm like, John, you're an incredible writer. Let's
Yeah.
do this. And so we did it. And this was in the pandemic. We sold it for the biggest advance either one of us got. We did a multi-book deal with Random House. We're about to sell it to TV series. And yeah, it's been a great thing. And it's, John's a pleasure to work with, and we're building this franchise kind of like a Jason Bourne franchise out. We finished Cold Fear, which takes place in Iceland, has some really human trafficking. There's a great SEAL versus SEAL scene, like just like tooth and nail to the death. I don't think anyone's had a Navy SEAL versus Navy SEAL scene. Very much like that movie Old Country or No Country
No
for
Country
Old
for Old
Men.
Men. Yeah.
We had this like psycho SEAL that's kind of on this, killing, like basically trying to hunt down our main character Finn, and they end up having this like fight to the death on the frozen ice, over this lake in Iceland. So it's pretty intense, but that's been a super fun project. So
That sounds amazing, man.
um,
I'm excited
yeah,
to
and
check it out.
we're building that franchise out. So that's kind of what I'm up to lately, as opposed to being a dad. I got to, my daughter's about to go off to college. My son's a sophomore at St. Andrews in Scotland. So good stuff.
That's awesome, man. Well, look, we could keep going on for forever, and we're going to link to Steel Fear too, so everyone can check it out. Again, I think what a lot of people, hopefully, the path to entrepreneurship, the path to finding like your right thing, I think takes a lot of different paths. And, from your story, at least, because I'm kind of listening and, kind of absorbing a lot of this, it's, I think really a true kind of testament to continuing to find, like having a vision of what you want to do, but also doing the things that you want to do, and doing the things that
Yeah.
you're passionate about. And like you said in the very beginning, like you said, that moment that you had in the very beginning of your life, right, where you're like, work doesn't have to suck, right? Work, you
Yeah.
can actually end up making a lot of money and start to do the things that you want. And so I hope a lot of people can listen to the story, et cetera, and think about, it's that time of year, everyone's thinking about what they should be doing anyway. And I think your story might, poke some people to go and do something that they're excited and something they're passionate about.
Yeah. It's never too late. You look at
Never too late.
the founder of McDonald's. Also, I read a case study at Harvard about the founder of Spider ski equipment, who also founded Pearl Izumi, I think, the bicycle components business. That guy was 47 years old when he decided to found two companies that just hit it out of the park. He ran Spider until he was in his 70s, and they sold it. I think they sold to private equity, but 47 years old, totally reinvented himself. So it's never too late for anybody to
I
kind of,
love that,
whether
man.
it's a career change or starting a business.
Well, yeah, 100%. We've had a lot of people too. We had a Rob. I don't know if you know Rob Saravalo. He's a Navy guy as well, and he is. I mean, he didn't start his career in the Navy till after college, and became a Top Gun pilot eventually. But just wait, 26. Like, what am I doing? Like, what? This isn't that's not the path I wanted to be on. So there's a lot of stories there. And again, I think that people can learn a lot from, as they read kind of your books and your history as well. And we'll link to all that. So Brandon, big thank you. Appreciate you joining us for the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Pleasure.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, look, I loved it. I hope everyone else loved it. Make sure, leave a rating, tell us what you think, as your thoughts on the episode, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.